Thanks so much for being here. My name is Ryan Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Oxford American. And we're just so grateful to all of you for being here, for participating in these conversations, but also to the Clinton School of Public Service for continuing to collaborate with the Oxford American and for all the work that they do in this community. So huge round of applause to Nikolai and Skip Rutherford for the work that they do at the school. And I also want to thank Superintendent Robin White, Chief of Interpretation David Kilton, and the entire staff here at Central High National Historic Site. You all have tireless commitment and spirit in preserving the history of the Little Rock Nine. And thank you for educating so many people about the broader context of civil rights in America and providing these ongoing opportunities for dialogue in our country. Despite the challenges that the park system faces in the current political environment, I want you guys to know that what you do is very important and indispensable, and we appreciate you. So I don't know where Robin snuck off to, but thank you guys. Thank you, David. And then secondly, I really want to thank the broad community of supporters who have made the No Tears Suite projects possible for going on 4 years. Specific to its current iteration and this reprise performance with the symphony, I want to thank the Stella Boyle Smith Trust, specifically Mike and Kathy Mayton. Without your passion for music and the arts in this community, we'd have never gotten off the ground with this project. So thank you so much. But in addition, I want to thank the National Park Service, the Mid-America Arts Alliance, Arkansas Arts Council, National Endowment for the Arts, Kelley Arnold, and the University of Central Arkansas. All right, so the No Tears Suite. I'm going to be as brief as possible, but we never dreamed that when the Oxford American was invited in 2015 to simply produce a free concert for the public at the National Historic Site, that it would turn into commissioning 60 minutes of new jazz, and that 4 years later, the project would still have life in this new iteration in front of all you. So thanks for being here, and thanks for being willing to participate, again, in the ongoing work of social equality in our country. So with that, I want to turn it over to our Chief of Interpretation at the National Historic Site, David Kilton, who runs things here day to day, and let him say a few words. Great.
Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Ryan and Oxford American, for continuing to just do the wonderful work that you all do, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it. I came on just before the 60th anniversary and got to kind of step into just all the wonderful commemorations and just collaboration work that went on with that event, and it's just been phenomenal. And continuing to carry that on and see what is happening over this weekend with the jazz and symphony ensembles, it's just awesome to be a part of. So I'm glad to be able to do that. I'd like to not take any more time than I need to, but I'd like to just briefly introduce and allow our panel and our moderator to kind of give some of their insight to their background and who they are as they introduce themselves. But our moderator today will be Chris Parker. And then we have three of the performers through the weekend's events. We'll have Rufus Reid, Bobby LaVell, and Kelley Hurt. And we appreciate that they are going to be sharing some of their knowledge and perspective through their experiences connecting with the civil rights movement and a reflection on the history and the relevance today. And I'm excited to turn the time over to Chris and the panel. And thank you all for being here once again. Thank you.
Is these on? Good afternoon. I'm going to be moderator, but I'll just give you a little background on how all of this came together. Ryan asked me at some point if I'd be interested in writing some music for 60th anniversary, and I told him, well, yeah, I'd be interested. And then he came back a little later and said, well, I found some money. Go ahead and write the music. And so I wrote it. Not really knowing what I was getting into. I had no idea that we would get to this point at that time. And after we wrote it, it was for a small jazz group. We performed it right over here across the street. When they decided to bring the symphony on board, I knew I was kind of over my head, or orchestration-wise. And I also knew that my bass player was undergoing major surgery, and he was the only person in the world that knew the music. So I'd always wanted an excuse to call Mr. Reid for any reason at all to work with me on any level. So I just took a gamble, and I looked at my wife and said, I might get turned down on this, but I'm just going to call Rufus Reid and see if he'll orchestrate my music for a chamber orchestra and play bass with me. And he was unbelievably receptive and really just kind of said, sure, just tell me what you need and I'll do it. And we've looked at the scores and played some of it. The music he took what I did, my little thing that I did, and just expanded it into a whole nother world. But today's conversation really isn't about us playing the suite. It's more about the implications of the suite. When we researched the Little Rock Nine, especially Kelley researched, we realized the subject was so deep and so broad that it's not past history, it's current history. And we're going to bring that into perspective just by introducing each other. But if you think about this, 1957 was merely the year that the Little Rock Nine came into the school. Little Rock School District was not fully integrated at all grade levels till 73. The Brown, I think the very final Brown versus Board of Education wasn't until the 80s. I teach at a magnet school, which was the whole magnet program was started from desegregation money, which just ran out 3 years ago. So I teach at a school that was founded off of something that actually happened in 1957, if you can connect those dots. And now the school district is in a huge controversy about who's in control and why and what are the real motivating factors. So none of it is really past history. Everyone in this room, just about, most of you either were alive or have relatives that were alive when this happened. So yeah, it happened in 57, but it's in our consciousness now. So we're going to kind of talk about what is our role as artists, or do we have a role? Or is it up to us to sort of figure out how we're going to stand on that? So what I'd like to do is just let each person introduce themselves, talk about, in Rufus's case, he's lived in more than one place, but he shared with me last night being stationed in Montgomery, Alabama. I think it was in the 50s?
No, it was 61.
In 61. So between where he grew up, you were born in Atlanta?
Yes.
And then you moved to?
I moved to Sacramento, California, and I was going to get drafted. I was 17, and so that was a foregone conclusion that I was going to get drafted. And so I used to play the trumpet, and so someone said, well, if you audition for the Air Force, if you pass the audition, you can get in the band. I said, well, that sounds pretty good. Holding a trumpet instead of a rifle, so that really sounded good. By the skin of my teeth, I did, in fact, pass the audition, and I spent actually 5 years in the Air Force. That's where I began to teach myself the bass. But they sent me, I was raised in Sacramento, California. I was born in Atlanta, but I the family moved, I was about 6 years old, and so I called Sacramento, California my home, but I still had relatives, and still do have relatives in Atlanta. But my first Air Force place was Montgomery, Alabama, which was for the Air Force, it was the Strategic Air Command. So, and they used to call it the War College. So when things were happening, I guess, all over the world, all these five-star generals would come to Montgomery. But I was also there during the Bay of Pigs. And we got pretty close. And I remember I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to play my trumpet. And but fortunately, nothing happened. But it was pretty tense for quite a while. And I was also in Montgomery, Alabama during when Kennedy was assassinated. So it was a very interesting time for me with the bombings going on in Birmingham and but Montgomery it was still very much segregated, but the bus laws had just changed, and so but that was just about it. But I began to really understand that, because in California there's prejudices all over the world. I actually experienced more prejudices in the Air Force in Japan, oddly enough, but I became a lot more aware of what I could do and what I shouldn't do, just because. You didn't have much of a choice, but the more you understood, you could keep yourself not hurt or whatever might be the case. But I was fortunate enough to meet some people that were just wonderful. They took me under my wing. My grandmother was a teacher at Alabama State Teachers College in Montgomery. Although she had moved to California, but when people knew that I was coming to Montgomery because of the Air Force, she let all her friends know. And so I had a network of dinners on Sunday, and they said Sylvia's son is going to be, Maggie's grandson is going to be here. So Montgomery, with all the things that were going on there, it was a very fruitful time for me to just grow up as a young man. But musically, it was also very, very strong for me, because that's where I saw firsthand Ike and Tina Turner, James Brown, Bobby Blue Bland, and I was playing a lot. And then I got shipped to Japan, and then I began to play even more. And oddly enough, like I say, I experienced more segregation in Japan because of one gate was where all the white people could go, and the other gate was where all the black people could go. I mean, you could go out those gates, but they had the bars or places where you wanted to eat, and nobody. If you went out here, you might not get served, Now, we're in Japan, I mean, it was really kind of interesting. But I began to really become quite aware of how difficult it can be. I used to have a drummer friend that he wasn't a musician in the band like I was, but he would go on R&R to Vietnam, because this was during the Vietnam period. And he would tell me they would go to the bar, and even in Vietnam, there was a black bar and there was a white bar. And then, but they would go to the black bar, and the Viet Cong would actually come and hang out in the black bar.
Oh.
And then they said, "Well, listen," and they were cool. He said, the guy said, "Tomorrow, don't go over there, because tomorrow, if you go over there, something's gonna happen." So he was just telling everybody. I said, "The guy actually told you that?" He said, "Yeah, because they had no reason to. Why we shouldn't have been there in the first place." But that's a whole nother story. But the military was really something twofold for me, a multifold in terms of how I've been able to sustain myself as a musician, a professional musician, and to be here. Is particularly when Chris called me he says, I said, "Yeah," right away. And then I said, what am I getting myself into here? Because it sounds simple, but it really isn't. Because this gentleman wrote some really strong music already, which I was very thankful to enhance some of this music. It's really a chore to try to make something really good out of something that's not good. We do enough of that on a daily basis sometimes. So consequently, I was very pleased the music basically spoke for itself. And so my challenge was to enhance something that was already very strong. And so I'm thankful for that. But I really learned a great deal. And of course, the premise of the music is really right here. It becomes right and paramount, right in, and of course, here 2019 is not a whole lot better than 1957 in a lot of ways, which is not nice to be able to say that. I mean, but I'm really pleased to be here and be part of this project, to see this school across the street. It's a massive building, and for me, it's actually quite educational, because there are a lot of people, if you don't really partake or be part of something, it really doesn't mean anything to you. You can read stuff, but the moment that you can touch something, or if you can see something and be part of it, then it would mean a whole lot more. So I'm really pleased to have been asked. Thank you.
Just on a side note, did you tell me last night when you got to Montgomery you were surprised to find out that you had family members that actually knew Dr. King's family? Well,
yes. My grandmother used to go to the church, same church, and of course, my mother, when we were in California, and actually we live in New Jersey now, and when my mother was still alive and our son was maybe 10 or 12 years old, and he was talking, we were talking at the dinner table about, it was Black History Month and Martin Luther King, and so my mother just kind of said, "Oh, and I knew young Martin," and and both my wife and I said, "What?" And my son almost fell on the floor, and he said, "You knew him?" "Yes, I knew. The senior, Martin Luther King Sr., and young Martin, and that's what she called him, young Martin." And so here again, I have those memories of they knew all these people, and knew how things had developed and how things. So that's something that I'm happy that I have that memory.
So I'm going to take the Martin Luther King thread. Both Kelley and Bobby are Memphis natives, and maybe we'll talk in a little bit about how the three of us are actually strangely connected through Bobby's father in a way. But Bobby, you were in Memphis alive at the time that King was shot. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I'm sitting here, and because I didn't prepare to do this, this may come out like a collage. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank Ryan and thank you, Chris, for bringing me into this. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee prior to the Civil Rights Movement. And I can recall getting on the bus and they saying, all colored to the back. I can recall being on the bus and seated in the back, and if a white person got on and didn't have another seat, I would have to surrender my seat. I remember this many times. I remember the white and colored water fountains. I remember a restaurant. It was a Dyer restaurant, and it had it was a diner. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a little diner, and they cooked in the center. White people could go on the one side, black people could go on the other side. The black side was never clean. It wasn't clean. So there, I'm listening to things, and one of the problems that we have, here in this country, is that we think, first of all, when laws are passed, that things get better. So many laws were passed and nothing changed. And the other thing that we have a problem with is recognizing things. We see things as we want to see them and not as they are. I don't, and I won't make this political because this has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with people. Keep a list of these things, because the other thing that we do in this country is we allow powers to be to personify those things that we don't have in common instead of personifying those things that we have in common as human beings. We need to take a conscious look at that, and share it with our children. But I have every confidence that the kids are going to get it right. Where we've missed it, I can see it. And I can remember our experiences, in Memphis. When I went to Memphis State, I didn't finish, but I did attend for a while. And we made a conscious effort to have our parents see us together as whites and blacks, trying to change the world. I didn't know of this place because I was only 6 years old. I would learn about it later. There's certain places in this country that have energy. This place has an energy. Daley Plaza, where Kennedy was killed, has an energy because it tells us something about ourselves. Where Dr. King was killed has an energy. Where Malcolm X was killed, it has energy. And there are others, but I've had some other experiences, that I don't really care to share right now because it would just take me too involved, to share that.
The thing you shared with me last night, though, I think just to kind of highlight the fact that, we look at all this to be in the past, but for you had a real personal experience with a Memphis police officer that you were telling me about with your mother that... if you could share a little bit of that, I think it just kind of illustrates.
It's okay. I can share the story, because what happened? My little brother had a little transparent gun that you shoot candy in your mouth. And when he finished with the candy, he was shooting the cars. And when the police car came by, he shot the police car too. A little kid. And so they frightened him and ran him into the house. As I came out of the house, I said, what's the problem? They told me to take my black self, an expletive, back in the house. My mother walked out at that simultaneous time. She said, officer, what is the problem? He said, your son has a big mouth. She said, I'll tell you what, if he broke the law, take him to juvenile court. If he didn't break the law, don't be messing with his damn civil rights. They leave. The very next night, I knock on the door. I open the door, and the officer pushes me. Says, where's the fight? So, officer, there's no fight here. My mother's coming up the corridor. She said, officer, I will speak to you in my living room. And at that time, he grabbed my mother. I ran down the corridor, I jumped, and I hit him, and I knocked him down. And right like clockwork, the other officer grabbed me. I'm coming out of the house, and then after that, my mother came out. Okay, we got lawyers and stuff, but before we went to trial, every other day, the police would show up at our house, or the fire department would show up. And what saved us is that we couldn't afford a phone, so we didn't have a phone, so they couldn't say that we had called them. We eventually won the case, and the senior officer, and I'll never forget his name. I don't want to call it here in this public forum, but I know his name to this very day, and the junior officer. We were told that the senior officer was fired, told the junior officer was suspended for a year without pay. We know that probably didn't happen now,
right,
because we've seen what's happened in subsequent years, but that was my experiences. But to the credit of my parents, and especially my father, who's a jazz musician in Memphis, and he has a note on Bill Street, his name and the name of his band there. To their credit, they made sure white people came by our house socially as their friends. That we had a healthy attitude that people are basically good and bad, and now somewhere we've lost that. We've adopted a clannish mentality where we are on different sides, and we say this. We say, well, I'm an American first, but we don't practice it. We don't practice it. These are things that we need to practice. We need to teach and make it a conscious practice, not just something that you say in jest, and it makes you feel real good to say it. It sounds wonderful, but do you practice it? Just like I've said to myself, and I've said to you guys many times, happiness is a choice that I make every day. It is something that I practice. Because there's enough ugliness in this world to keep you so far down, and I refuse to be there, But as far as our responsibility, I think we have a responsibility to mankind itself as human beings to teach and share. If you are a person of principles, don't compromise your principles. Don't allow anything to compromise who you truly are if you are that person. And recognize whether or not you're that person. And whether you are a fraud. Or whether that's just something that you would like to be. Because I know a lot of times we want to. I've said this, I see somebody do something heroic. And I say, I hope that I can be, that courageous at the time. I don't know. I really don't know. I know I would like to be. That's okay. You can thank you. But and so this is something that we need to put into our psychic and keep it on the front burners, not to just to allow it to eradicate or to dissipate, but to keep it burning, keep it pushing. And
just now to tie Kelley into the conversation, Bobby's father, Honeymoon Garner, was a well-known organ player. When I first went to Memphis, he was one of the first people I met and heard about, and it was also the guy who gave Kelley her first professional gigs. So, and we heard about Bobby for years, and then later in New York, we finally met him, and then you realize how small the world is. And talking about present history, I'm going to share a kind of a story. When Kelley and I were dating in Memphis, I lived in a house full of young musicians, and they would often practice late at night, and they would have some of the younger kids in the neighborhood, teenagers would come over because we had instruments. And one night Kelley and I had come in, and everybody was hanging out in the front room and playing music, and we just went back to my room. We were tired, we'd had dinner, we went to bed. A few minutes later, my room is pitch black. My door opens, and there's a really intense flashlight in our face. And I used a few expletives because I assumed it was some kid in my neighborhood poking his head in my room trying to see what was going on. It was a police officer. who had come up, two officers and a rookie in training were just driving the neighborhood. When they heard the music and saw underage people, they entered the house without a warrant. And then they subsequently came in my bedroom without a warrant. And they took us in the front room and had all the guys there, and the kids were there. And I'll keep it polite, but they basically told me that they knew my wife was a prostitute and they knew what we were doing. And she kept me calm, and I stayed calm. And I guess because they had no warrant, what they did was they took the beer and they poured it out in the front yard, and then they got in their car and they left. So when we say things are past and present history, Bobby experienced something decades before we experienced something. And was it racially motivated? In our case, I think absolutely, because they saw white and black people of multiple ages, and the music was playing, and so they just assumed that there had to be something going on, had to be something wrong, and this was a perfect time to go in there and just barge into someone's house and pull them out the bed. So as we continue to look at this whole concept of the Little Rock Nine, we don't want to look at it as past history. And I would like Kelley to kind of share what you found as you began to explore the nine themselves, and the process of sorting out so much of that information.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. Can you? That's not working. Okay, thanks. It was pretty intense for me, not only because of our experiences as an interracial couple, but just mainly because being from Memphis, thank you. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I can feel, once we were invited to do this project, I could automatically feel the same feelings that I had in Memphis. You feel this when you are from a city that has what you may say a storied past, or something that follows it for the rest of all time. You feel the weight of it. I was 2, if that's right. I think I was 2 when the assassination happened. I do remember the curfew. I asked my mom about it. The curfew in which soldiers were traveling up and down the streets in the neighborhood at a certain time to make sure everyone was in the house. You couldn't leave, and this was like weeks, months. There were curfews established. You couldn't leave your home after a certain time. You couldn't go downtown, because downtown then, I think, that's where the revitalized Main Street is now. You couldn't be down there at a certain time. You couldn't be downtown at all after this happened. And to grow up with the weight of it, to grow up in a musical community where everyone was always with each other. And part of what I saw and what my parents saw was the segregation of musicians, which was strange, because once this occurred, then you had this. I heard someone say it once. All of a sudden, we were having to choose a side because something dreadful happened that none of us had taken a part of. But as much as none of us had taken a part of it, each one of us was responsible for it. And that's the weight of Memphis. And so when we were approached with this project, I had heard about it, of course. And when we moved here and we met Ryan and planted this silly seed in his head, because he goes, so do you all just do duo, or do you all play with, jazz ensembles and symphonies. And, have you ever done stuff like that? And we're like, yeah. And Chris is like, yeah, she's done that all the time. We didn't know that a couple of years later, he would approach us with this. And then I said, well, yeah, but it's kind of heavy, isn't it? And Chris is like, yeah. And I said, well, I'll research it. And I went down a rabbit hole and just went, and how you can go to that vortex and you see like 15 sites and you read all of them and then you're introduced to all these books. Our friend Danny Brown, who's a teacher in Pine Bluff District, he, an English major, gave us the book.
Warriors Don't Cry.
Warriors Don't Cry.
Melba Patillo Beals.
Yes. And he said, well, hey, if y'all serious about this, well, just check this out. And that was the jump off point. About 10 sites later, I'm looking at him and I'm going, how in the world am I going to distill it? Okay, how am I going to be a gatherer and have all of this stuff in my head? Because I'm trained to put stuff in my head and just chunk it out and blow it off, and that's it. How am I going to put all of this into my head and all this energy, as you talked about, all this energy and all this weight and all of this that people still feel excited about today here? Talking to his mom about her experience as a young child, going over there and going to sit on the wall because she saw these people sitting on the wall and she was wondering what's going on at the school. And she was supposed to not be over there. And she's over there and all of a sudden she sees not happy faces, but angry faces, and she's so upset, and someone says, child, you get out of here. And she runs all the way home, and she's scared to tell them that she was there.
She had skipped school.
She skipped school, and she saw it.
The Little Rock Nine, it was everyone knew it was going to happen that day, and so she thought it was a celebration and went. And when she realized it was the opposite of a celebration and felt the energy and the anger, it really scared her. She was about 10 years old. Yeah. There used to be, I guess, the equivalent of housing projects off of Pine and Cedar and 12th in that area. So she ran from Central High all the way back there as a 10-year-old girl and locked herself in a room. But something you also mentioned was in relationship to Memphis. You came up, and Bobby knows about it. There was a music scene that was extremely integrated. Like Stax Records was extremely integrated.
The studios were extremely integrated. They always were integrated.
And then
the bands, the groups, they all played together. Once the assassination happened, it literally put question marks in everyone's head. Nobody wanted to be told how to act. Everybody really was like, this is it. Sometimes you have a horrible thing happen. You say, this is a horrible thing. Now it's happened. Now it can go away. But it really kind of doesn't go away. And you start seeing from the musicians I've spoken with a total shift in who felt they could play together and who felt they could no longer play together.
Like you said, you felt like they were forced to choose sides.
They were forced to choose sides. And that's literally what was told to me. It was like we were forced to make a decision as to where we stood. Nobody wanted an assassination, and none of us wanted that, and none of us were ready for the repercussions of that. No one was. And so, like this event, that event is still a tender thing, and I found that out, and that's how I had to come to the conclusion that I have to gather this and squeeze it out really hard and then take that part and distill it and see what's left. And that's when I got to the kids.
Well, eventually you realize there's so many players and you
Yes.
only have so much time. And by players, I mean, you had the governor of the state, you had the president of the United States, you had L.C. Bates and Daisy Bates, the
Yes.
NAACP. Eventually, who really deserves the focus? And it just
Right.
came back to, well, those kids, because they were doing the work that the adults couldn't do. The
Yes.
adults did not get it done. So the kids had to do it for them. So I'm going to take that to transition us maybe to the second half of this. I'm going to come back to Rufus. Now that we all see the histories you guys have and the perspectives you have, but you're also musicians who have to make a living and feed your families. What do you feel about do we have a role in this movement, or can we have a role? I know you did another project recently celebrating another historical figure in your own writing, so it's not a foreign thing to your process, you know.
No, but we as creative musicians, I think I'm finding out even more so through composition of writing music inspired by art or events like this one, things that actually are huge, things that have more than just writing a song that just came to you. Most of us now, particularly as I get older, I begin to realize that I need to have a reason for doing something. I wrote some music because I actually got the impetus through a commission that I applied for that I was quite sure I wasn't going to get. But I did, and I wrote some music inspired by the sculptures and the art of Elizabeth Catlett, who was a very unsung artist in the United States. And she has quite a story herself in terms of being a very outspoken woman during the MacArthur days in Harlem, but she was quite an artist. Had the first black woman to get a master's degree in art from the University of Iowa. She got accepted to Carnegie Mellon, but then when they found out that she was a black woman, she couldn't go. But she was accepted in the University of Iowa because they were quite artistically involved, but she couldn't stay on campus. We're talking about the late 40s now. So it's, but just last year, they actually have a residence hall in her name. And I had written, it was a 5-movement suite based on 5 of her sculptures. And I got a chance to meet her. My wife and I got a chance to spend a week with her in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And it was really quite interesting to me to be in another artist and another creative place, because we do the same thing, but we do it differently. And it was really a thrill. And so right now I'm actually more so than ever before, and I'm not saying this as to patronize Chris, but I mean, this project, once he began to tell me about it, it actually began to be, I'm not sure how I'm going to really do this, but I want to do this because it's powerful. And so this is, and I think this is what we as creative musicians, we particularly jazz musicians, we live for the unknown, so to speak. It's a calculated situation. When he told me in played me the music that was recorded of the band with Bobby and Brian Blade and Chad and everybody else that was involved with it. And then when I got to hear that, I said, wow, how am I going to add to this and still keep it pristine like it is? And that was my challenge. But I think as creative musicians, or anyone who's actually creative, whether it be a painter or a sculptor or a novelist, or we don't see colors, we don't see races. I've never. I think that's one of the things that people just don't understand. If you can play, you could be blue.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. If you actually go to another country, you can't speak their language, but if you play, then you're one of the guys. And that's a global thing. And this is one of the things that I think makes it kind of special for us, because as you'll see if you come tomorrow, the band is multi colors. I mean, it's amazing, and all doing the same thing, and we're there for that purpose. And to me, I've pretty much tried to make my whole life being around people who just place in such a way that I need to have some of that. And so I personally have grown from playing with people. Even when I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and there was a tenor player, and I was the only black person in the band at that time. And there was a tenor player that kind of played like a Al Cohn, Zoot Sims style of player. And he taught me. I didn't know what I was doing on the bass, except my ear said to do that, and if my ear didn't like it, I changed to something else. But he liked the feeling, and he taught me from the beginning. And so then I went to Japan, and then I studied with a Japanese symphony guy. We couldn't speak. He said, no. And so I would do whatever he did. So the music is amazing. You can do so many things without putting all these other filters in the way, and it's healthy for everyone. And if you come tomorrow, you'll see the product that has happened. Even our rehearsals. I want to hear the rehearsals tonight and tomorrow, but I'm so satisfied now. I could go home now, because I've been satisfied with these efforts, and the mere fact that you're here in this room means we need to be able to be vocal about and just remind each other of what hasn't been done, and yeah.
I think we need to be reminded who we are. We have written things in our constitutions that we are not abiding by. That's who we are, and we aren't being that person. I'm just going to be. I'm going to fall into an era of an abyss of redundancy right now when I say, examine yourselves. Examine, where you really stand as opposed to what you really do. Examine what you say. What impact does it really have? And do I really care about this, or am I just, kind of secure in my little shell? Because a lot of us are very secure in our little lives. And we don't want them disturbed, and Dr. King said this, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, history will record that it was not the vitriolic cries of the bad people that is the shame of this period, but the silence of the good people. for me, that has such impact because I see it daily. I see it daily, and like I said, that once again, that's that courage that we have to step out and say, this is wrong.
Well, also, you mentioned something that I think is a good point when you said, we think a law gets passed, and so it's like, okay, that's taken care of.
It's taken care of. The problem has been eradicated.
Actually, part of the whole reason that the whole Little Rock 9 event happened was there was a law passed, and the law said you're going to proceed with all deliberate speed, or Kelley, you can correct me on that.
That's right.
Basically, it said y'all need to hurry up and get integrated. And people always point the eye to Little Rock, but it wasn't. Brown versus Board of Education wasn't in Arkansas.
Right.
Okay. There were many states that deliberately found loopholes and ways to not integrate. So they passed a law, and then basically L.C. Bates and his crew of folks in Arkansas are going, so what do you mean? Like, there's no timeline. Like, when? And the establishment of Arkansas said as slow as possible is what they basically said. So passing a law doesn't do it. It actually comes back to what you're talking about. We have to take responsibility on ourselves. And I want to ask Kelley a little bit to talk about the fact that part of this could have been where we just say, this is something that happened in the past. We're going to celebrate the Little Rock 9. That's a past event, but part of, I think, the direction you kind of took was that, no, we can't just talk about it that way, but there has to be some kind of ongoing, in some of your lyrics to Don't Cry,
Yes.
You talk about it, where are we going to move forward from this,
Yes, because like you like to say, this is present history. And I liked doing this piece because we acknowledge what happened, but what we really wanted to do when it came down to it was honor 9 kids who made a simple decision. I mean, when you think of this, 9 kids decided that, yeah, I want to do that. And, quite frankly, and all hell probably broke loose in each and every one of their families before they even begin to even think about it. I remember in the book that she says, I hadn't told my family yet that I had wanted to go to Central and that they picked me. And then all of a sudden, it was on the news and they started talking about people and saying their names out loud. And she was going on a vacation and she thought it would just, as a kid would, she thought it would just go away. Because she was like, I changed my mind. I mean, I didn't know all of this was going to happen. They're saying my name. People know where we live. My family, my cousins, all of these people are getting affected just because I said, yeah, okay, I want to be over here. I heard they have a good program of this and that. And she thought she was going to surprise them.
She did.
She thought she was going to, like a kid. That's why I focused on them, just to say, hey guys, those 9 figures that are standing up on the north side of the Capitol over there that you probably pass every day going down Markham, or else you sneak through the Capitol and you go through there and you go, oh, I wonder who all these people are all lit up. And they were just ordinary teenagers who said, yeah, I think, someone said, do you think you might want something a little better? Yeah, I might want something better. Will you struggle a little bit for it? Yeah, I'll be all right. Yeah. Are you confident in telling your parents that, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Can you do it by yourself? what if nobody supports you? What if, just what ifs, like all the what ifs that happened before they even got there that day. You know, I've always felt my role as an artist is to be an artist. Artists are, you know, you have historians and they are artists too, because I met some as soon as I got here with him, and just little things like that would happen to us, and next thing I know the history of the Heights and Hillcrest, and why Hillcrest isn't included in calling it Heights, and because it's in a certain part of the hill, and that's why it's Hillcrest. And then Stiff Station, which is right there, that's not Hillcrest, that's Stiff Station. You know, small little things like that. But it was the historians that got me kind of interested, just having dinner with them. And then once again, when he says, well, can you write these lyrics? And I'm going, I don't need to write anything. It's already there. But what I did need to do was to bring it in and arrange it so you're just reintroduced and say, hey, that's Melba Patillo Beals. She wrote a bad book. And when I mention it, at least some of you are going to go get it.
We're going to, in just a second, open it up for some question and answer, but there's another side to being, like you said, your job is to be an artist. From just the things they just said, a couple things occurred to me. One, just this type of music in general, it already has an effect on people, because look at the room right now. We've already brought a whole lot of different types of people. If you want to go into the categories of people, and you want to talk about gender, race, age, background, the music has already brought us together right now. Let alone you have a voice to express something like Kelley or Rufus express when they, talk about certain historical events. Another way, though, that occurred to me was a lot of people don't know Louis Armstrong was involved in this too. He actually went to Eisenhower, and it was one of the people that lobbied to go ahead and take military and federal level action. And, at that time, Louis Armstrong wasn't always seen as a serious political figure. Right. Even in the black community, he wasn't always seen in that light. In fact, there were some people that had some negative opinions of him being in movies with jungle garb and, as they say, bucking your eyes. But there's another side to him where he actually made decisions to say, you know what, there's something wrong, and I do have a connection to the president, and he does listen to things I have to say. So I could be silent, but he wasn't silent. Now, sometimes I think just artists, we can use our platform in many different ways. It may just be bringing people together, or it may be not even musical. Maybe we need to go to a congressperson because we have a connection to them. But before we get out of here, I would like to invite any of you guys who just want to ask any of these people questions about their work or their art or their opinions. This is the time. Feel free if you have any questions. Yes.
First of all, this has been a very beautiful experience. I'm a Little Rock native, and I was 12 years old when it happened, and it impacted my family. But the thing I want to know is if the lyrics that have been written will be available for us to read, because some of us have older ears. And I'm going to be there tomorrow night, but I don't want to miss a word of the lyrics. I'll hear the music, but I don't want to miss the lyrics.
I don't know. Do you know that?
Is there a program?
Is there a...
I don't know if
They probably
that
won't.
was a great idea, and I wish I had met you 3 days ago.
Yeah, because we could have submitted all of them. Because what I did, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I narrowed stuff down to just a couple of sites, and I made the decision to use public access things because none of this, with the exception of one song, which is all mine, all of the other lyrics are facts. They're actual facts that anyone can see and anyone can look at. And when I started telling him, I said, I'm going down this rabbit hole. It's just too much information coming at me. And what he told me to do is that, well, you can treat it as though you're having like 8 different conversations about the same event, which is exactly what I did. That's what made me that's what created a focus for me. But what I did was narrowed it down to 3 or 4 sites that I knew I was websites that I was gonna use the content from and make sure to give them that recognition, because I really want everyone to do what I did. And when I was approached with the subject, the first thing I did was like, hey, well, how easy is this to look up for free? You know.
What were some of the? Tell them what.
I can tell you. I can just go there right now. But I'll tell you the sites because it was pretty interesting because it had, like for instance, the situation that we're in now, the magnet school situation. One of the issues back then was that they were going to create a private school entity in which certain people could have the option, if they didn't feel like their child was going to be safe or comfortable.
This is 19.
This is very true.
58.
They wanted to implement a system, a separate school system,
choice.
A private school system, in which certain people, if they didn't feel comfortable continuing in the school that they were at, once they were integrated, they could go to private school of their choice. But only certain people could do that. Not everyone could do that. And that was something that they tried to implement in the school system, and they didn't. See, that's one of the little tidbits that I had to leave out because you can't include everything. But
well, you used the Little Rock 9 website.
yes, the websites, I'll have to read with my real glasses on. The Encyclopedia of Arkansas.net has so much history. History.com, Wikipedia.org, and LittleRock9.org is pretty awesome. It tells you everything about the 9 students. And the interesting thing about it is they've done so much. It's incredible. It's incredible just how from a simple decision, someone can say, instead of letting these other negative things because of my choice just flatten me out and I do nothing, I'm just going to keep doing things. And then in the end, it'll look like I've done everything. And it's every single one of them. So that was those 4 sites, and then the Warriors Don't Cry book, because that was my 6 or 7 perspectives that I chose from.
In the back.
My name is Jeremiah.
Yes.
I'm a 1979 graduate of Central High, and I grew up with the crisis on my mind and learned it. I was a little bit disappointed when I was in college that some of my classmates from other places did not understand or know about it. But there was a lady from Austria, Germany, who studied and knew more about it than some of the locals.
Yes.
And also, a few months ago, Warriors Don't Cry came here, did a one-woman show. Mm-hmm. I grew up with this, but after seeing that show, the audience sat there after it was over. They didn't applaud because it was so intense.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you for bringing the creative process to bear in your craft on this issue. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Just very quickly, sort of provide a little something, which you were talking about the young people.
Mm-hmm.
I yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And you're also, all of you, talking about being artists.
Yes.
And as you were talking, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I am the wife of a saxophonist and the mother of a dancer. And I was thinking, isn't that how artists get started too? Oh, of course I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, of course. And the odds are so against you. And I was trying to think what the difference is because, you know, and especially when you talk about how before and after the assassination of Martin Luther King, that things separated. Mm-hmm. And anybody who's around jazz, I don't think you know, it's only me who has heard there's still, like, people are negotiating race and what it means in history, mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, what you said about the real question is, can you play? And so what does that inform us about, can we work together? Because as I understand, I'm no musician. When I want to threaten my husband, I said, I'm going to crawl on stage and play piano someday. But you have to get to a certain level to really collaborate, and it's a lot of work. Well, a lot of work. What does the artistic community have to say to us about how we work together? So I'm inviting you to take it there.
Well, one of the things that, because society seems that the art is frivolous, and what we're doing is maybe because we can't do something else, or maybe you could do something else so you could back it up. There are all kinds of connotations in terms, because everybody wants you to be successful at whatever you do. But myself personally, I can't do anything else. I don't want to do anything else. Now, then I realized I could do something else. I know how to cook. I know how to wash dishes. I know how to do a lot of things. When the computer came out, I said, oh my, what is that? But the music, I think all artists actually can do a lot of different things, because in particular, if you're a performer, you have to learn how. Many of us as creative people maybe don't have the ability to be quote unquote vocal, or to be up front, or I had to learn how to speak. Believe it or not, I used to be shy. But I ended up being a director of a jazz program at a university for over 20 years. I learned how to speak and how to project my thoughts. And that's what we do as creative people. We learn, and we have to practice. Yes, practice and practice again. And the more you think you got it, then you can never get better, because you just are always reaching. Right. That is one of the most wonderful things about being a creative artist, is that you never get, you will never get it all. I have a relative, and she says, I thought you were at the top of your game. I said, I'm not in a game. I said, this is just what I do. And it seems like every time I play, I heard these young kids today, right across the street. Two of the bass players were playing really good, and one was 16. I didn't even touch the bass until I was 18. So but these kids are lit, and so I think it's really, once a person really realizes that they've gotten into situations I didn't even know, but somebody said, who I really admired, and said, yeah, man, keep it up. That's all I needed. That's all I needed. And then if someone who I've had a great deal to play with, his name is Benny Golson. He's one of the great saxophonist and composer of our music, period.
Oh, yes.
And he's in 89, something like that right now.
I think he's 90.
Well, he just got there.
I talked to him the other day.
But he's an amazing man.
He sure is.
And he says, he heard some of my music. He said, Rufus, yeah, man, I thought you showed me another side of you that I didn't know it existed. Man, I was good for another 10 years. I mean, because coming from someone like who we as a jazz community, he is really
he's royalty.
He's royalty,
he is,
truly.
No doubt about it.
And so to get a kind of a tap on the shoulder and from someone like I'm good. And this is what and this happens your whole life. You meet people that heard you today. There was a young trombone player that played bass bone, and he sounded good. And I just said, man, you keep it up. And he's going to carry that with him for a long time. I know it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to all of us at some point, and will continue to do so. And that's why we end up doing what we do, because I can do other things, but I don't want to. And so that's a choice. Because see, my son, for instance, he's an engineer and he's working, he's got a good job and everything. And then one day he says, I want to be like you one day. And I said, you never wanted to be like me. He says, but you wake up happy doing what you're doing. And that's huge. If you can wake up every morning and be pleased to do what you do, and like he says, don't be silent. If you really don't like the things that are going on, then become more vocal about it. And you don't have to go and cause riots and things like that. You just, in your own little space, that you begin to let people know what you believe. And it'll take care of itself. I mean, I have to believe that way.
You were asking kind of what you do. I'll share something with you. I started a music program at a private school, and somewhere I remembered that someone had said to me, music makes you more intelligent. So I did some research, and I found a stack of studies that had said, and this is very important, that music, 15 minutes of music in a child's, as a part of a child's curriculum, test scores are higher. From study to study, the more music that they had, the test scores got higher. There was a Japanese study that said that music activates an area of the brain that nothing else wakes it up. But music is trivialized in the educational system in a lot of places. It is not supported like it should be. Whenever they get in trouble, they cut the music first. This should not be. So if there's something we can do, we can elevate that knowledge that this should be a part of our curriculum. We now, I think, are 17 educationally in the world? Don't quote me on that number, but we're down there. We're not where we should be. It's part of the reason, in my opinion. So that's something that we can look at, and I'm not talking about the music that you just danced to. I'm talking about the reading of music, the construction of music. I get in some real trouble with this one, but God Almighty, because as much as I like hip hop, it does not have the elements of music that activates the areas that I'm talking about. Oh gosh, somebody's gonna kill me, but that's okay. I'm old enough to not care anymore. I'm on the backside, so it's important, because In my opinion, hip hop is rhythm and rhyme. It's good rhythm and rhyme, but it does not have the elements of music, harmony, octave displacement, fragmentation, augmentation, diminution, and all these other elements that are part of the construction of a symphony and the construction of the stuff that he just did. And I think that's important for us to elevate and not once again to ignore.
Okay, I know we're getting close, so I'll make sure you get your comment, and then we're probably going to have to wrap it up, but please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, panel. I'm learning so much by being here with you today. I love music. I'm also a dancer, and my children have danced as well. And as I was sitting here, well, first of all, my name is Angel Burt. I am the Vice President of the Dunbar Historic Neighborhood Association. And I do want to mention that the students that went to Central High, the Black students that went there, they went to Dunbar first. And our association want to be a part of bringing that history back as well. But as I listened to you, the first thing that really came to my mind when we were talking about civil rights is the Motown era, the music that really brought everyone together. I think recently they did a Motown review, and I was so surprised. It was just as many white and Caucasian and Black people all in one arena. I was like, okay, so this music really meant something. And then I was like, okay, so you have all these Black artists and all these terrible things that were going on against Black people, but at the same time, our music was being loved. And I want to ask you, what is that? How does that work? I mean, really, quite honestly, I say, how can you, it's like a love-hate relationship.
Well, it's not a love-hate relationship. You want to know what it is, really? Artists are sponges. Willingly or unwillingly, we will absorb everything around us, and that includes the people who hang on to your past or give your past to you and pass it down to you, and also what we think the future should be. We emote. So basically, as an artist, I feel we emote all of that in our work. So whether you're willing to be political or unwilling, what I found, especially with this project, Chris and I have found ourselves in this situation a lot, and we don't know if it's on purpose or what, but we often don't approach something, as Bobby says, politically. We don't approach it that way at all. It literally happens to us. And then we realize, ooh, and kind of what you asked me was what someone else asked me. How did you create a positivity from a negative event? How did you create lyrics to emote positivity from a negative event? And it just simply came down to a simple person making a simple decision. They didn't know whether it was good or bad. They just made a decision. And in spite of bad things that happened to them, they felt it was good.
Good music, I don't care where it comes from, you can actually have people completely close their eyes or walk in and they just play a song. The song doesn't tell you it was written by a Black person or a white person or a green person, or if it's a melodic, it affects everybody. And the problem is, if we all live in situations. Right now, I'm told I'm a jazz musician, and that's what I am. But I've been writing some orchestral music prior to this, but I put my name on it, but then somebody says, "Oh, well, it's written by a jazz musician. He probably really doesn't know enough about classical music." So I've been thinking about a pseudonym. You know, I'm going to be a Mark Twain. I'm going to put another name on something because it may all of a sudden just get another look. And that's one of our issues, is that
Labeling.
a good song is a good song. I mean, Duke Ellington would say, you know, there's no bad music.
Right.
If it's a good music, it could be anything. If it's good, it's good, and if it's
Or the other kind.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, a good song or music that it becomes timeless.
Yes.
You begin to listen to, like I just mentioned to this guy, Benny Golson. I mean, there's a song that he wrote in 57, 55. It's called "The Killer Joe." Now, this was a song that just was a simple song, but man, it was on jukeboxes all over the country, black and white jukeboxes, because it was just a Horace Silver. You know, in Montgomery, Alabama, I began to see people dancing. I said, I said, what is that bass? What is that? Who wrote that? And I look at the little 45 and it said, Horace Silver. But who is that? And then eventually I began to see that name, because you don't know anything until you know it.
That's right.
So eventually, this is what we have to do, is just begin to teach people. These are the people that we have to become aware of, and they will teach you about some other folks, and then some other folks. Like, you just got a name of somebody who wrote some music or wrote a book about this whole event. So we're all here getting an education. We're taking away something, you know, that we didn't come in here with. And to me, that's our challenge, you know.
I think what you're kind of addressing, though, is the fact that we still have an identity crisis.
Yes.
And we haven't really learned to love ourselves because we can't accept all of what we actually are. So, and trying to wrap this up and give it back to these guys, I think I don't have an answer for that, but I think you pointed at kind of the heart of the question, is that when we really learn to embrace each other, then you won't have those problems, because everyone likes that music, but then we're told at some point, well, you're white and you're black, and so y'all have to have a separation. But when we listen to the music, we realize there isn't a separation.
Once again, just very briefly, once again, we have been led to believe the things that are different about us are more important than the things that we have in common. That has to be reversed, because we have everything in common.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'd like to do to kind of close, I hate to be the person that has to end the conversation, and that's the thing, is we don't have to have this conversation end. And that's one of the joys of working at this site and being a part of partnerships like this, is it's a place to have these discussions. And we get to see those almost on a daily basis here. And we aren't separate, just like was pointed out by Bobby, is we have so many similarities. And as we come together and share, we become better, we become stronger, and we can learn and grow so much from that. So thank you all for sharing your stories and the importance of why you're part of this. And I'd like to encourage you all to make sure you get to go and see their talents over the next couple nights when they actually do perform. And so we'll have the performance tomorrow night at the Mosaic Cultural Center starting at 8 o'clock. And then we will also have the concert here at Central High School at 3 o'clock on Sunday. And we'd ask you to come and be a part of those as you are able. And I got to see the performances during the 60th, and they were amazing. So I'm excited to see with the added symphony and the added pieces. It's going to be great. So I'd also like to thank you all for being a part of this. Thank Oxford American, and definitely our panel. One more round of applause for Chris and Rufus and Bobby and Kelley today. Thank you so much for joining us. All right.
You can reserve seats for Central. It's free, but it's a limited amount of seating. I don't think it's sold out, but on the ASO website, if you look up the event, it will allow you to, give your name and contact information and how many seats you want to reserve. So it's free. You can't beat that. So.
Speaking of websites, one of the things that Ryan asked me to make sure is the lyrics for the songs will be on the Oxford American website. So if you want to connect, and that'll be available, and you'll be able to eventually find those there. So the Oxford American.
.org. We'll make sure we get them on there.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you all for joining us today.